Talking all things SEC baseball on the latest edition of the Windup. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Harrison Fant, as we have just 2 weekends remaining in the SEC baseball regular season. The chase for the postseason continues. Harrison, what's going on, my friend? We have got a loaded show, a lot of great SEC baseball to talk about from over the weekend.
Chris, great to be here. And the SEC delivers for us every single week. And if you're not watching college baseball, you're not watching the SEC, there's no time like the present. You need to. You have to. And it's just the best baseball in the country. And just, God, we have a lot of great stuff to talk about today.
We do. And I'm excited, like I mentioned. So many great series. It was hard to pick a lead from this past weekend. By the way, guys, before we get going, check us out across all social medias. Of course, we're on YouTube. We're on podcasts. And thank you to our friends at RHOBACK for sponsoring this segment. Check them out over at RHOBACK.com, promo code SECU to get 20% off your first purchase. Harrison, let's go ahead and dive into everything. The weekend that was weekend number 7 in SEC play. And like I mentioned, it was somewhat difficult to pick a lead for this show because there were so many notable series. We had upsets. We had sweeps. We had impressive performances, both team and individual. But where I want to start is this series. Tennessee taking down Florida, and the biggest reason is this, because we got to give Tennessee their credit. The new number 1 team in all of college baseball, the Tennessee Volunteers, after taking down the Florida Gators 2 out of 3 over the weekend in Tennessee, doing it with an exclamation mark, by the way, in Game 3. They won that one 16-3 in a game in which Jack Caglione pitched, which was really, really surprising. But Tennessee, Harrison, let me throw this at you. Tennessee has been the most boring team in college baseball this season. And I say that as a compliment because they've won 7 SEC series in a row. And it just seems like it's like a professional golfer. Like the best golfers, their brand of golf is boring. They hit every fairway. They hit every green. They 2-putt, maybe 1-putt, but it's just very pretty much standard, right? Very rarely is there a deviation from the norm. That's kind of what Tennessee has been, man, because we've spent so much time this season talking about Arkansas, talking about A&M, talking about Kentucky, and deservedly so, but it's almost like Tennessee has been flying under the radar because it's just like it's ho-hum at this point. They just take care of their business weekend after weekend and finally getting that recognition in that number 1 spot.
Chris, I can't agree with that. I mean, yes, they're taking care of business, and they're doing so, I guess, in a quieter way than other teams are, like in A&M or Arkansas. But every weekend, they're just mashing the baseball on the offensive side. They're shoving on the mound. They're doing all the right things. I mean, just the program has gone in such a great direction. And I don't think it's quiet. I think it's just being overshadowed by other SEC teams and the caliber and the players, like a Hagen Smith, or just the turnaround that A&M has had this season. But I mean, they are taking care of business like no one else in the country.
Harrison, how would you say this year's team for Tennessee compares to 2 years ago? Obviously, it's a different dynamic. They don't have quite the record they had 2 years ago, but I think you could argue maybe this team is even more complete than that one 2 years ago, which is a scary thought, by the way.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's very similar. Just offensive power leads the kind of team and just the mindset going into each game when you're playing Tennessee, but different arms on the mound. They obviously don't have Chase Burns either, but they've really kind of honed in on who they have and just a lot of veteran presence in the lineup and just the lineup stacked up and down. And then a lot of great pitchers. And it's a very similar team, I think, just slightly different. But Tony Vitello has just done a fantastic job yet again. And he just continues to lead these Tennessee Volunteers into a great season and hopefully lifting the trophy at the end of the year. That's their goal for sure.
And Harrison, we talk about swinging the sticks and offensively when it comes to Tony Vitello's club, but I thought what was so impressive from the weekend, I just mentioned Jack Caglione just a moment ago, and he goes on Sunday, 5 innings pitched, 6 hits, 4 earned runs, 5 strikeouts. Not terrible, right? Gave his team a chance to win. But the way Tennessee attacked him, swinging the stick, he's been so good all year. He did extend his hitting streak on Saturday, or game 2, I should say, 24-game hit streak for him. But in this series, just 5 for 9. He did not have an RBI in this series. You hold Jack Caglione without an RBI over the weekend, good chance you're going to win that series. I thought the pitching, that combination of the weekend rotation with Causey, Drew Beam, Sechrist, what he did as well, Nate Snead as well for Tennessee. I thought they just did a really, really good job of managing this Florida lineup.
Yeah, Chris, and it starts with game one because I think AJ Causey just in that Friday night role or game one role per se has done a fantastic job since he transitioned to that earlier in the year, and he's just one of the toughest pitchers to hit, I believe, just where he has that kind of odd sidearm delivery motion, but just the movement he has on his pitches, just throwing sinkers and sliders, just like frisbee sliders. He's got a 93-mile-an-hour sinker that I think is just really hard to pick up for guys, and the amount of horizontal movement is just not something you see every week in the SEC, let alone much at all. And I think that it's just a huge advantage for him, and just unbelievable how great of control he has with it, and just the manipulation of the ball. It just really plays up to how good his pitches are. I mean, 5 innings, 7 Ks, no earned against a stacked Florida lineup. I mean, you got to give him his props, and that just sets the tone for the weekend of the series. So it starts with that role, I think.
Yeah, wildly impressive stuff. We're going to talk about this Texas A&M LSU series next, Harrison. But first, I want to look what Tennessee and Florida have upcoming. Tennessee at Vandy, and I know Vandy, I can't wait to talk about them because that is a team. Who knows what the heck Vanderbilt is. But Tennessee closes with Vandy in that great rivalry, and then South Carolina in Knoxville. Florida has Kentucky coming to town, who just took down Arkansas 2-3, and then at Georgia. Fantastic job of the SEC putting that rivalry series last, the final weekend, I should say. But again, we're talking about these two teams. We're about to talk about A&M and LSU. I'm going to go ahead and get this question out of the way, Harrison. We presented this question on social media. Florida just dropped 2 of 3 to Tennessee. LSU, we're going to get into in a second, just took 2 of 3 from number 1 Texas A&M. You look at the records; they're somewhat comparable. They're pretty comparable, actually.
Very similar.
Very similar. LSU's done a much better job in the midweek. They're 31-18, but they're 9-15 in SEC play. Florida, 24-23, but they're 10-14 in SEC play. 2 weekends left, then Hoover, then the postseason. Who would you buy more stock in right now? Because these were both preseason favorites. Both have had disappointing seasons. Which of the two would you buy more stock in right now to make a run this postseason, turn things around, get hot? The LSU Tigers or the Florida Gators?
Chris, that's a really tough question to answer, and it just both have very similar seasons and just makeups as teams on both sides of the ball. I really got to lean LSU just with the experience and just the coaching staff, I think, a little bit more than Florida. Nothing to take away from Kevin O'Sullivan and their crew. They did a fantastic job. But honestly, it's just literally a nail biter for me. Like, I could easily see Florida go into the SEC tournament, win 4 games, and then just go in a postseason and slide in the postseason and just go on a run. I mean, that would not surprise me one bit. LSU doing the exact same thing wouldn't surprise us. I believe one of them will. It's just we're going to see who does it, who steps up and goes on a run. I mean, Florida, I think – this weekend, yes, they lost a series to Tennessee, but in the first 2 games, holding Tennessee's lineup to 6 runs and 4 runs. I mean, I think they did a really good job stepping up on the mound. The hitters kind of really didn't do too much against Tennessee's lineup, but the pitchers, I mean, Liam Peterson did great in game 2. Jamison Fisher, both, I think they really did shut out Tennessee really well offensively. But then you could say the same thing about LSU and how they did it against A&M's offense and their bullpen, which we'll get into that. But I think they're 2 very identical squads, and tell you what, you don't want to see either one of them in your regional. That's for sure. I mean, imagine you're hosting a regional and you have a 2 or 3 seed LSU, or Florida. It's like, thanks, committee.
I really do think it is a coin flip, like you mentioned, of who's more likely. I would probably lean LSU either. I don't think things are going to get easier for Florida with Kentucky coming to town and having to go to Georgia. I mean, that is not a recipe conducive to a hot finish to the season. And we'll see what they do in Hoover, but it feels like you got to put more faith in the defending national champs. There's a lot of guys still on that roster who were in Omaha last year, who hoisted that trophy, who I think LSU, I think what you're going to see, they're going to sneak in the postseason, and there's going to be this belief in that clubhouse that, hey, brand new season, and this is LSU baseball. We are supposed to win now. Like, we are supposed to win. And so,
I mean, Chris, think if they go to an Indiana State regional.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it's not going to
like Louisiana.
Yeah, it's not going to surprise me at all if they go on a run. At least make the supers. That will not surprise me at all. Speaking of LSU, Harrison, this is a great segue right into it. The reason we're talking about LSU and even posing this conversation is because the LSU Tigers, I can't believe, honestly, neither you or I picked this upset. Shame on us. Shame
as
on
much
us.
as much as we wanted to.
I didn't
try backing that up.
Because I've picked LSU a lot this season and gotten burned many, many times. But what we saw, Harrison, this weekend, the teeth of Alex Box and what can happen when you get a raucous crowd down in the bayou, right? The weather's warming up. Number one, Texas A&M comes to town feeling high and mighty. And I think, again, what they experienced, A&M's going to be fine, right? But it happens in the SEC. When you go into an atmosphere like that, there's 10,000 screaming Cajuns in your ear. And LSU gets the job done, takes 2 of 3. Their first series win against the number one team in the country since 2016 against Florida. They take game 1 6-4, game 2 6-4, and then Texas A&M wakes up game 3, and they do work in the finale. How surprised were you, Harrison, if surprised at all? Did you consider this a massive upset, or was it one where you were kind of on the fence when you made your pick and were like, you know what, I could see it, but I got to give A&M the benefit of the doubt right now?
So looking at this series and breaking it down, looking into the weekend, I had LSU winning game 2 because I just thought they were going to pitch Luke Holtman again and kind of offset that. And they're playing at the box. I mean, incredible home field advantage. I don't care how good or bad LSU is in any year. It's unbelievable home field advantage. And any player that's played there can attest to that. I promise you that. But I just thought that A&M had more depth on the pitching side in game 3 because LSU is probably going to go with more of a bullpen style. And they did. They had 7 guys through. And Nate Alkenhauser, who started in Omaha last year in the College World Series, he opened it, but only went an inning and 2/3. But, I mean, it's just the depth, like having Chris Cortez come in and his 99-mile-an-hour sinker, and he's throwing 93-mile-an-hour sliders. It's just unbelievable. I mean, it's crazy. He has just like this. He has like a split sink. I don't even know what it is, but there's so much depth on it, and just the pitching staff of A&M is what put me over the edge for them in the consistency of which the higher level of baseball they've been playing. So.
I think this weekend, Harrison, proved, too, is we're really starting to set our sights on the postseason, again, the SEC tournament, and of course, regional play, supers, et cetera, College World Series. I think what this past weekend showed is we talk all the time defending your home field, winning on your home field, and this weekend showed why that's important from the standpoint of it makes such a difference to be on your home field in the postseason, right? Regionals, supers, what have you. Because again, you go to a place like an Alex Box. I know not everywhere's like Alex Box, but you go to a place like that, you know, it doesn't matter how you're rolling, how good you feel about yourself, weird things can happen. And, you know, you get an LSU crowd behind them, and I know they're not going to be hosting. LSU would have to go on some crazy run to be hosting this postseason. But maybe they could. I mean, heck, who knows? Who knows? RPI, strength of schedule, that stuff plays into it. But it just really showed, I thought, Harrison, like the value of being at home and why we preach on that and harp on that daily, because there's just things that happen when you go on the road that are hard to explain or hard to, hard to really make sense of, that seem to happen every single time. So, again, I think Texas A&M is going to be fine. I think you just really, though, have to chalk. And, hey, listen, I thought it was kudos to A&M for getting game 3. I mean, that's, again, you go on the road, a place like that, just don't get swept. Yeah, just don't get swept. I mean, that's a huge win. Not enough people will give enough credit for that. But certainly every series at this point for LSU, Harrison, it's must win. I mean, it feels that way.
They needed at least one, but getting 2 was huge, especially the first 2. But I mean, I think you have to give props to the bullpen of LSU to shut down A&M's offense. I mean, one of the best offenses we talk about in the country with Bray Montgomery, Grab and Greg Hovick, and Jay Slavillette, and just, I mean, Hayden shot all of them. I mean, it's just Jackson Appel, the Ivy League transfer from Pennsylvania. It's unbelievable. But Christian Little, I think, just for me, was the standout piece in the bullpen, as well as Griffin Herring. But more so Christian Little, I think he found his mojo, maybe. I mean, I really do. He was a great talent coming in at Vanderbilt, had a great season. Then second year, struggled, transfers to LSU. I think they wanted him to come in to be a starter or the closer, is what Jay Johnson brought him in for. And what he came to LSU for, but he's just kind of been figuring out, and he had a fantastic outing in game 2 of the bullpen, just really shut down the A&M lineup. He was 95, 97. I think he touched 98 or 99 on the mound, but he works primarily off his cutter, 87, 89, which is, you got to think an 80, 79 mile an hour cutter is just unbelievable with the mid 80s changeup and slider. He was sharp. He was dialed. Just the confidence is an all-time high. He was locked in, and it might be just what he needed to go just be an absolute dog in the bullpen, and having the rest of the bullpen kind of heat up at the right time, like Griffin Herring coming in and shutting it down game 1. I think he shut it down in game 3 as well. Just those are the key pieces you need, and for a team like LSU and the point where they are in this season, to go on a huge run.
And you look at the upcoming schedule, Harrison, for both these sides. Texas A&M got to go to Ole Miss. That's a tricky series. I know Ole Miss isn't great this year, but Swayze, hey, Swayze is as Swayze does, and you just went to LSU and felt the effects of a road atmosphere. So at Ole Miss, and then Arkansas at home, we've talked about a lot. That could be, and looks like it will be, the series that will determine the winner of the SEC West. And then LSU. Here's what's interesting, Harrison. We were just talking about the LSU Florida argument. We talked about what Florida closes with. LSU's at Alabama, which is tough, but Bama's reeling, so very winnable. And then Ole Miss at home. All of a sudden, LSU, they could get hot. It lines up.
Weeks ago, yep.
And their schedule was so front heavy. It was so front loaded.
Absolutely.
Like, it was so crazy front loaded. I wonder
and that
how much
series loss at Mississippi State doesn't look that bad anymore.
No. And I wonder how much different the perception of LSU is if, some series are moved around and it's more so kind of scattered. Like, we're probably looking at them talking about, like, man, they sure are inconsistent, but we're probably thinking of them a little bit differently. And so all of a sudden, you're 9-15 in SEC play. So you need to win, right?
Yeah.
Probably asking to go 6-0 is a little much, but, it's one of those things where if you can, my goodness, what a boost that would be. And I bring that up, Harrison. I mean, this is a conversation for another day. What's the magic number for LSU? Saw this stat on the broadcast over the weekend, by the way, Harrison. I think it was the Georgia Vandy broadcast. Eligible at large SEC teams to reach the NCAA tournament since 1999. How many wins they had and in conference play, and what percentage of those teams, how many reached the postseason, right? So LSU is, I just mentioned, 9-15 with 6 games left. Teams that have had 0 to 11 SEC wins, they get there 0% of the time. Teams that have had 12 SEC wins, 18% of the time. Just 3 teams have done that, made it to the tournament with 12 wins. 13 SEC wins, 38% of the time, 10 of 26 teams. 14 SEC wins, 70% of the time. So your odds start improving, 16 to 23 teams.
Double.
15 SEC wins, 78%. Okay, 21 of 27, and then 16 plus wins, 100%. You win 16 SEC games, you're in the postseason. So for LSU, just keep that in mind. If you really want a shot, you got to get to at minimum 13 SEC wins, which would mean you got to win both the next 2 series. And if you don't,
Chris,
you probably have to go on a crazy run in Hoover to get there.
Yeah, but the problem is, if you look at the RPI, Florida's the whole comparison of Florida and LSU being similar teams. Florida's 23rd in RPI and LSU's 34th. And that is all predicated on quad 1 record, I think. The most off because, yes, LSU has a better non-conference record, but Florida has 10 wins in quad 1. They're 10-14, and LSU is 4-11 in quad 1. This is magnificent. That's huge difference. And I think that's something the committee is going to really focus on. So that stacking as many SEC wins as you can the rest of the season in the tournament is going to be absolutely crucial. But you got to think, are they really, if they're on the edge, are they really going to leave out the defending champs?
That's a good point.
And the prestige that LSU has.
And you know what? People will hate to hear that, and they'll think SEC bias, but there is a reason for that bias. Let's just call it
5 of the last 9 champions or LSU.
The bias, the bias exists for a reason. So to your point, if LSU's on the edge, it would be wildly controversial if they got left out. Let's just put it that way. Wildly controversial.
I think they need 4. They need 4 SEC wins, and then
I think they need
definitely doable.
I think they need 4 SEC wins, and then a win or 2 in Hoover wouldn't hurt. I'll put it that way.
2 would be crucial.
Yeah.
1 would be on the fence.
50, 2 wins in Hoover, I think they're a lock to get in. So
all depends on how it ends up getting seeded. Because if they have to play, like a Tennessee in the second round, if they make it past, an Ole Miss or something.
And like you said, some poor soul out there would have to take LSU in their regional as a 2 seed or maybe even a 3 seed, which would be nuts. Let's move to Harrison. We'll keep it moving. How about them damn Kentucky Wildcats yet again? And shame, I guess shame on me because I didn't mean this as an insult, Harrison. But what I said on social media was, and Kentucky fans gave me grief for it, this was the shocker of the college baseball weekend. And they clapped back at me and said, who's shocked? Who should be shocked? And what I meant by that was the fact, like, you and I both picked Arkansas. And I looked at the D1 baseball guys and everybody picked Arkansas. Outside of a couple people here and there. Kentucky just continues after a really tough weekend against South Carolina. They lose that series. Take down the Arkansas Razorbacks in Lexington after losing game 1, by the way. Hagen Smith did his thing, ho-hum, 6 innings pitched, 3 hits, 1 earned, 14 strikeouts, 125 Ks on the year, which is nuts. Kentucky bounces back. They went 11-3 in game 2 and 7-4 in game 3. Woof. Your thoughts, Harrison, on the Kentucky Wildcats after a really, really impressive weekend?
So 2 weeks ago, when they played Tennessee at home, it was a top 5 matchup. It wasn't on national TV anywhere. Still an issue with that. I still am frustrated about that. I picked Kentucky. I just thought that there was a big series they're going to prove. They're playing at home. They're fantastic at home. One of the best teams in the country at home. And they played very well. They lost the series to Tennessee. Backed them up the next week after a great series against the Vols at Georgia. They ended up dropping that one. I was backing them up. I thought I liked a lot from what I saw on both sides of the ball. Pitching I thought was getting better. I just couldn't get burned 3 weeks in a row. And I had a lot more trust in the pitching staff at Arkansas, even though it hasn't been as great as it was to start SEC play. But Mason Molino back in the starting rotation, I thought I just had a little bit more trust in Arkansas's starters. And then having Will McIntyre, one of the best relievers in the SEC in the country. I think he struggled a little bit. So that was kind of where I was really on the fence with this one. I mean, just playing at Kentucky, you don't think it's home field advantage at going in as a visiting team, but for them, we're playing at home in front of our fans, at our ballpark. That's huge for them, and that's why I leaned Arkansas and went with it, because I thought a lot of people were going to be riding Kentucky too. But kudos to Kentucky. I couldn't get burned 3 times in a row.
Harrison, teams don't simply walk into Kentucky Proud Park and live to tell the tale, my friend. Yep. And you look at the weekend again. You have to almost. I mean, it sucks to say this, Harrison, and not for Arkansas, obviously, but it sucks to say this as an opponent. Like, you almost have to chalk up game 1 as an L to Arkansas, because Hagen Smith is just out of this world, right? He cannot be beat, at least to this point. But the way Kentucky bounced back, and I thought the pitching they got, Dominic Neiman, that was such a good sign for them to see him go into the 6th inning, only gave up 2 earned. And then game 3, Mason Moore on the bump, only gave up 2 earned as well.
Battle of the Masons.
Battle of the Masons. And, Kentucky 12-5 against ranked teams, 16-5 in quad 1 games. Let me ask you this on the Arkansas side. Are you concerned about Arkansas's hitting going into the postseason, right? I mean, Arkansas is safe. They're going to be hosting. They're just fighting for a top 8 national seed. What national seed is it at this point? But I saw on the timeline this weekend, a lot of Arkansas fans are pressed. A lot of Arkansas fans are concerned. Do you share those concerns about Arkansas's pitching going into the postseason? Arkansas's hitting. Yes, my apologies.
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, not as much as I think Razorback fans on Twitter or X are, because I think
maybe that's not the greatest sample of folks either. I don't know.
No, but when you look at it, Peyton Stovall is just in the leadoff spot. I think he's a fantastic leadoff hitter. I mean, he's not a Christian Moore in the leadoff spot. I think it's a completely different kind of role and style and kind of ball player he is. But like Kevin Kendall Diggs, he had a fantastic series. I mean, game 1, he had 4 RBIs, a double. I mean, he just had fantastic at-bats. And I think he just kind of is the core piece of the power of that lineup. And I think they had a really good, a lot of really good at-bats this weekend. I mean, yes, they lost the series. They only scored 3 runs and then 4 runs in game 3. But I think they have a lot of power and a lot of potential. It's just for it to be clicking at the right time and scoring with runners in score position. I think for any team, that's the most crucial thing, whether you're one of the best teams in the country and have a fantastic pitching staff behind you or not. It comes down to hitting with runners in score position. It's crucial. It'll win and lose games.
And you look at what's coming up for Arkansas. They've got Mississippi State at home. Tricky series. Do not go into that one thinking it's going to be easy. Tricky series. Then at Texas A&M, the finale, we've talked about plenty of times. It's going to be fantastic. Kentucky, got to go to Florida. Then Vandy at home. Kentucky fighting to win the SEC East and the SEC overall. They got the best record in the conference, Everson, right? It is amazing to me what Nick Mingione has done. Kentucky trying to do something they have not done since, I believe, 2006 is what I saw, win the SEC outright. So
yeah, Chris, I think we got to give a lot. I mean, we continuously give props to Nick Mingione, but just the Kentucky offense against one of the best pitching staffs in the SEC, let alone the nation. I mean, the offense just to score 11 runs and then 7 runs in 2 games on Arkansas's pitching staff. I mean, Brady Tigert struggled a little bit the past couple starts. I mean, he had some walks early, got out of a jam in the first, got out of a jam in the second. But Nick Lopez, Emilian Petrie, they are the headline. I mean, they headlined the offense this weekend, but then you have Ryan Waldschmidt and you have several other guys that are just studs. This Kentucky lineup, it just gets better and better each week. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, Nick Lopez has a 21-game on-base streak, and he's 21 stolen bases. I mean, he's got 48 stolen bases in his career. I mean, that's unbelievable. In the SEC, that's not easy to do. But, he really headlined the offense and just was kind of the core piece of what their run production was this weekend. And just a lot of really good at-bats, really mature hitter, and just kind of scrappy. And this Kentucky offense, I think, gets really overshadowed a lot because it's not a headline SEC team like LSU. But I think, yes, they've proven a lot of people wrong, but people really need to pay attention more to Kentucky's offense. And that, like you said, a huge start from Dominic Niemann, the Central Connecticut State transfer. I mean, that was huge. He struggled in his past couple outings. So having a big bounce back game for him against the top 5 Arkansas, huge. I mean, he kept hitters off balance all over the zone, kind of, manipulating his pitches, living around the edges. And he had a lot of really good defense. And we talk about Kentucky's kind of philosophy: sound defense, stealing bases, grinding out at bats. That's what Kentucky's kind of built upon this year and who their identity is. And to have the pitching kind of step up and limit Arkansas as much as possible. They won the series versus Arkansas, but you got to be stoked for how well they played in just the next couple of weeks ending the season.
It's truly amazing what Nick Mingione has built in Lexington, Kentucky. And again, to watch them try to make it to Omaha, I believe, Harrison, for the first time in school history, if they do make it. I don't believe they have. I don't think they've been before. Kentucky fans, I'm sure, will correct me if I'm wrong, but what I read on social media, I don't think they've been. So the race down the stretch is going to be absolutely electric. Speaking of electric, by the way, Haberson, you were boots on the ground in Athens, Georgia. Let's talk about that series. The Georgia Bulldogs, Vanderbilt Commodores, squared off at Foley Field for what was the ass beating of the weekend. I mean, my God, the ass beating of the weekend. Georgia, 10-run ruled them in game 1. They ruled them in game 2, and they beat them 11-7 in game 3 to move to 28-3 at home. Dude, that's another storyline that probably isn't given enough credit because there's just so damn many. Wes Johnson, year 1, Charlie Condon, what he's doing. I mean, it is absolutely incredible to watch, my friend. Give the people, obviously, we're going to talk the series as a whole, your thoughts on Georgia taking Vanderbilt to the freaking woodshed. By the way, you're seeing why I didn't trust Vandy. You're seeing why I haven't trusted Vandy practically all year because we don't know who they are at this point. Thoughts on what Georgia did? And also, give the people an idea. You were boots on the ground Saturday. What was that atmosphere like? What was that environment like? Because, again, I think Foley Field doesn't get enough love, especially this season. It has become one of the most feared places to play in all of college baseball.
That might be a little bit of a stretch just from my experience visiting SEC schools, but
28-3 at home. 28-3 at home. I'm just saying, 28-3 at home.
I mean, LSU's record at the box isn't that great, but I still think the box is a little more feared.
I said one of the most. I said one of the most. Not the most, one of the most.
I mean, I could name a list right now if you want to go that rabbit hole, but to answer the question,
we're trying to show Georgia some love, man. Come on now.
Now. So I mean, Foley Field, great. It's a great atmosphere. There's a lot of fans. It wasn't sold out Saturday. I was a little surprised about that. I mean, they got bleachers in right field with a scoreboard. Those are pretty packed out. And then you got a lot of kids in the hill in right field where I've gone to see some games the past couple of years with some friends. They're all cheering from there. It wasn't just an overly rowdy atmosphere. It's just when Georgia scores or a strikeout, they're loud, they're cheering, and they're providing a lot of energy and just pumping up and supporting their guys. And I think Georgia really feeds off that at home. It's not like you're pitching against Georgia, you're facing Charlie Connor, and it's just loud. I mean, it's not like a ruckus atmosphere. It's not like you're playing, at not at Lindsey Nelson, but at Neyland Stadium, or you're not playing in Sanford Stadium. It's not like that kind of loud. Obviously, football's a little different, but they provide a lot of energy, and it helps when you're scoring double-digit runs every single game against an SEC team. But the fans were really into it, and I was sitting with a couple of guys that used to play at Georgia actually back in the '90s, and they were really cool to talk to, and really fun to hear kind of some stories from them. They said, back then, because Saturday we had a rain delay for about an hour and a half, which no one loves that. But he said back in the day, we had to pull our own tarp. We didn't have a grounds crew doing that, So just those kind of stories you hear are awesome. And just the fans are behind it. They stayed the entire game, even through the rain delay. Everyone just kind of went underneath and then came back out once the game started about an hour and a half later. Shout out to the Georgia freshman, Sutton, I believe is his last name, for taking a little ride on the tarp. I know you saw that, so that was pretty fun. But no, just we give so much praise to the offense, and I think it's still underappreciated. Wes Johnson, we could talk for 20 minutes on how great he's been. Just year one, just over delivered. But obviously he'd be like, this is the standard because he came from LSU. He's had so much professional experience in MLB. This is his standard now. And I think that's going to be the tone going forward. And I think a lot of Georgia fans are going to start expecting that too and be like, all right, Wes Johnson's our guy. Like Kirby Smart's our guy. Wes Johnson's our guy. And I think that's going to be the tone going forward. And he's setting that standard, building that culture. And it's been built around Charlie Condon. And it's been built around Corey Condon, just all these other guys who've been studs for Georgia this year. It's unbelievable. Their lineup, it gets deeper and deeper every year. Because early in the year, you remember we were talking about how deep is this lineup outside of Charlie Condon? Can you pitch around him? They've answered those questions, and they've punched teams in the mouth. They've punched SEC teams in the mouth. Vanderbilt, they have a lot of really good pitching. That's, I think, struggled a lot recently, but doesn't mean, you struggle. You have 5 runs this game. Next Saturday, Bryce Cunningham throws a 9-inning CG. That's the kind of style Vanderbilt's been this year. But to go do that 3 straight games, double digits, they're a home run-led team, but it's not by just one guy. It's not Fernando Gonzalez, who actually batted in the 9-hole. He has a lot of power. He's only got, I think, 8 or 9, 10 home runs, but they have 9-hole home run power. You got leadoff home run power. It's unbelievable. Slade Alford, just Paul Tates, and just he had a great series. But I do want to talk about freshman Trey Phillips, DH, who had an unbelievable series. I think he has so much raw power. He's going to be a big piece of this Georgia lineup this season as a freshman, but also the next couple of years. He had a couple home runs that were just juiced out of there. Just looks like so effortless, like power and exit velo from him. This whole lineup, 1 through 9, it's stacked. It's unbelievable. And the pitching has really stepped up too. We talk about it. You have Charlie Goldstein, who pitched in game 2 when I was there. He looked phenomenal, Chris. I don't know how much of that game you watched, but he came out in the 3rd with, I think it was like a left kind of oblique injury, or he had some issue he came out with, but he was dicing. He was shoving, 3 Ks through 2 1/3, but he was locked in. And then Colton Smith later, the last 4 innings, he shut it out. 4 innings, 6 Ks, 1 hit. It's just the bullpen stepping up a lot too. It's unbelievable. I think he's going to be their staple guy in the bullpen. He's kind of turning into a Will McIntyre at Arkansas, just being their guy. And he's got some velo behind it too, for sure. And just really good breaking ball stuff. So it's all going to be predicated on, I think, the bullpen, and just the length of starts you get out of starters. But the offense, like, hey, let's say a starter gives up 3 runs, 4 runs, we're still in this game. With our lineup, we're still in this game. And not a lot of teams can say that, when they're down 4, 5, 6 runs. Georgia is one of those teams that can say that because of how stacked they are 1 through 9. It's not like, we got to get back to the top of the order. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 can all mash and hit for power. And that's the biggest thing for me to take away from this weekend.
Yeah, it was a complete performance by Georgia. And again, we talked so much about the offense. You mentioned Haberson. The pitching was so impressive. Leighton Finley, 6 innings of shutout ball. You
He was
mentioned,
unbelievable.
yeah, you mentioned Charlie Goldstein as well, who left the game with left side soreness. Colton Smith just picked it up from there. And then, it was a typical Sunday game. I mean, 11-7. That's kind of what you expect in a game on a Sunday. So Georgia's able to, go through and win that ball game. But Charlie Condon, homer in all 3 games, which is not even surprising at this point. He is now at a grand total of 33 bombs.
Chris, he's such a mature hitter.
You have to start talking about him as one of the best SEC hitters ever. Or this is one of the best seasons ever by an SEC hitter.
He's going to break the BB Core record. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. But he's just such a mature hitter. He jumps on fastballs early in counts, right? And then he's up ahead in counts, like 3-1 in game 3. 3-1 hanging breaking ball. Like, let me flip one in there, get back to 3-2, and see if he kind of expands his zone. 3-1 breaking ball, he sees up, and he was, I don't know if he was sitting on it or just saw it like immediately out of hand, but he crushed it. I mean, he's got 7 straight games of the home run. Remember we talked about Jack Caglione having 9 straight games of the home run 2 weeks ago? He's now tied Cags' 2023 record of 33 home runs, and there's still 2 weekends left. It's insane. He's the number 1 prospect now in MLB for the upcoming draft for a reason.
Yeah, nobody has seen their stock rise more than Charlie Condon this season, and of course,
fantastic story.
Yeah, that's helped Georgia immensely. A team that now, Harrison, we were talking about before the season. Hey, if they can just make the postseason in year 1 of Wes Johnson, be a great year. Dude, they're going to host. I mean,
Georgia's going to host.
They're going to host. They're going to host
boots on the ground for that too.
Postseason baseball at Foley Field to be electric. Harrison will be boots on the ground. They've got South Carolina upcoming at their place, tricky series, then Florida at home. And lastly, before we get off this series, Harrison, what do you make of the Vandy boys? Because we had the convo last week of, well, who's that middle of the pack team that you would buy most stock in to excel? And I didn't joke, but I said, Vandy is right there when you look at record. Like, they're middle of the pack. You said, well, I'd take Vandy in a heartbeat. They're middle of the pack, Harrison. This is a middle of the pack team. They have all the characteristics. I don't give a damn how hard they throw, what the pitching's like, who the names are. This is as middle of the pack as it gets. That's what they are. So, they're literally just fighting for their postseason lives, much less hosting any baseball at Hawkins Field. Your thoughts on Vandy? I know every time you say every time I'm overreacting, their downfall is greatly exaggerated. Bro, they stink on the road. Terrible.
I don't think they've had a signature series win this season. Is a big issue.
And that's everybody's knock. They've beaten nobody.
Yeah. It's tough. They're 23rd or 26th on RPI. They're 6-13 in quad 1. It's just, you don't have those signature series wins. They've gotten swept on the road. You lose a lot of series on the road. They're not great on the road. But I'm seeing and hearing some rumors for Tim Corbin's job.
Come on. Now.
Apparently he's kind of like Dabo. He's not diving into NIL at all. He refuses to. I don't know if that's true or not. Some speculation, but Tim Corbin's a legend. He's one of the best coaches in college baseball. And it's just if you think about it, they're very similar to South Carolina team. Very scrappy, middle of the pack SEC team, but with much better pitching, excuse me. Bryce Cunningham can go out there and throw a CG. He gets hit around the game before he starts, but don't be surprised if, they give teams trouble as a 2-seed or a 3-seed, or going to run in Hoover. A lot of veteran talent on that team. I know they've lost a lot of big names. They don't have a Jack Leiter, Kumar Rock. They don't have a Enrique Bradfield Jr., roaming the outfield like Byron Buxton, and mashing in the leadoff spot, swiping 40 bags. But, don't be surprised. They've been very inconsistent. It's been frustrating to watch for me as well as, Vandy Boy fans. But, postseason's a whole new game. Like you said, when postseason comes around, it's a brand new season. Everyone's 0-0. Anything can happen. Tim Corbin is the guy to lead someone in the postseason, lead a team in the postseason.
Vandy's just got to make sure they get there. That's the key at this point. They just got to make sure they get there. Speaking of teams fighting for their postseason lives, Mississippi State taking on Alabama at Duty Noble Field. The dude was rocking. State takes the series against Bama, 2 of 3. Bama able to salvage one in that game 3. Your thoughts, man? Mississippi State, they 10-run rule Bama in game 1. Bama's been another one, and I feel like this is one I should pat myself on the back because everybody was so high on Bama in the preseason. I just didn't know. I'm not saying they're bad, but they're not nearly, I think, what folks expected them to be in the preseason. Your thoughts on this series? State's just another fantastic story this year. The dude was
After you
rocking
call
as
for
it should.
Chris Lemonis' head.
After I called for Chris Lemonis' job. Indeed. Your thoughts on what Mississippi State did over the weekend and the way they've positioned themselves now? Because, again, we're talking postseason, and it looks like we just might get postseason baseball at the dude, which would be fantastic.
Chris, it's one thing to note, and I know Bama fans are going to put an asterisk on this series. I think about half their starters or half their teams dealing with food poisoning, some stomach bugs. So,
Okay.
yeah. So, I mean, that's one thing to kind of note. I mean, you had Will Hodo and, I mean, TJ McCann's. You had Cade Snell. I mean, Ben Hess. They were all kind of under the weather and just, as I guess you could say, gave it the old college try. I mean, it's no Jordan flu game, but to salvage a game of 3 when you're dealing with stomach bug for half the team, I mean, in the SEC, let alone at the dude against a really good Mississippi State team. I think that's a lot of kudos to them for that. They've been struggling on the mound a lot this season. Ben Hess is, especially out of the gates, he was really good and just a great pitcher and just had really sharp stuff and just kind of a struggle the past couple weeks throughout the SEC, which if struggling in the SEC is not like rare. It's not like, oh my gosh, like you have to think SEC is the best conference in baseball year after year, the best talent. And it's every week, there's no let up, but like to go out there in game 3 and salvage a series with a lot of, guys not feeling great. I mean, it's hard playing in the sun in general at Mississippi State in general, but when you're dealing with the stomach virus with half the team, I think you put an asterisk on it, but you also give him a lot of credit for not getting swept on the road. I mean, but when you're facing Drangelo St. John in game 2, I mean, he's been one of the most under the radar great pitchers in the SEC, let alone the most interesting pitcher in college baseball, being a both-handed pitcher, lefty and righty, throw mid upper 90s righty, low to mid 90s lefty with breaking stuff on both sides. And he went 8 Ks over 7 innings. He spread out 7 hits, only allowed 1 run, no walks. I mean, he's unbelievable. But when you think of Mississippi State this season, Chris, the name you have to think of is Hunter Hines. It's undoubtedly Hunter Hines. And when Hunter Hines is hitting and mashing, Mississippi State's win games most times, right? I mean, game 1, you get run rule 13. You run rule Alabama 13-3 in 7 innings. Hunter Hines, 2 for 2, 2 home runs, 4 RBIs, 2 walks. I mean, he's on base every single time. He had 3 runs. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, you had Cal Stevens on the mound behind him, goes 7 innings, 3 earned. I mean, then you think of game 3. Game 2, I believe it was weird because he went 0 for 3 with I think he had a run scored, but the offense around him picked him up. The 1-2 guys, David Amirashan and Bryce Chance, went 4 for 9 with 4 RBIs combined. So like to have Hunter Hines not be your lead guy in the offense is huge for them. So if they can continue to do that and not solely rely on him to be the half of or majority of their offensive production, they're going to go really deep this postseason. But Hunter Hines is definitely, he's I don't want to say Charlie Condon of them, but he is their core, their power, and he's the soul of that lineup for sure. I mean, you also have Dakota Jordan too.
Yeah, he is definitely the heart and soul of that lineup. And Dakota Jordan, a guy I feel like has been, we haven't talked about a lot this season.
Fantastic athlete, though. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, great athlete. And you look at what's upcoming. Alabama's got LSU at home, at Auburn, Mississippi State, at Arkansas, and Mizzou. State sitting at 14-10 in SEC play. Bama at 10-14. So Bama's got to be careful. You got to be careful because LSU's tough. I know at Auburn. I mean, Auburn, I think they're kind of just taking on the mentality of, hey, let's wreck people's season if we can.
Bama needs pitching staff to step up big time.
You got to close out strong, man, because you're flirting with missing the postseason. You are, unless you make a big run.
And they've got a really good team. They really do. I mean, the lineup's just been inconsistent. The pitching staff hasn't been dominant as they were early in the season. I mean, Ben Hess is really struggling. He's at almost a 7 ERA now. It's really tough. I mean, you have Zane Adams, he's been solid. He hasn't been dominant, but Greg Ferrone's their guy, and you just need to continue to ride good starts from him, and you need guys to step up. I mean, you can say that for every team, but Bama needs pitchers to step up.
We'll close it out, Harrison. These final 2 series, we'll group these together because certainly these aren't headliners, but South Carolina takes 2 of 3 from Missouri. Ole Miss takes 2 of 3 from Auburn, a wild ending in that 3rd game between Ole Miss and Auburn. Your thoughts on these 2? Again, Ole Miss and Auburn, these are 2 of the bottom teams in the SEC. Ole Miss is now 9-15 in the conference. Auburn sitting at 4-20. So again, it looks like Auburn more than likely going to miss the SEC tournament, as is the Missouri Tigers, who are 7-17 in the league. For Ole Miss, again, they're just fighting for dear life with 9 SEC wins right now. South Carolina felt like a very important game 3 where they were able to secure the series. It was a rubber match. Again, it comes down to a Sunday rubber match for them. They find a way to win. Thoughts from the series in Como and Auburn, both the Gamecocks and Ole Miss finding ways to get road SEC series wins.
So I'll dive into Ole Miss Auburn first so that I can get to South Carolina, Missouri, because I think there's more to talk about there. I think, like you said, Auburn's just trying to, they're trying to fight for their lives and, just end on a good note. They're a really underwhelming and underperforming season. But, I mean, if you're Auburn, you're just trying to mess other people's seasons up, I guess, if you want to call it that.
I mentioned that, too, because I've seen Auburn fans talking about that. Like, hey, we're just trying to wreck seasons. Yeah,
Yeah, but, I mean, the guys are still fighting every game. I mean, you can't take away from the effort that they give. It just hasn't been the season, the results that they've had or wanted. I mean, neither team or Ole Miss too, especially when we compared Ole Miss and Mississippi State early in the year, who was going to have a better season, who you have more faith in. I don't remember what you said, but I said Mississippi State. But
I think I said State as well.
Yeah. Just to get it. I mean, South Carolina, Missouri, though, Missouri's in a similar situation as Auburn. But if you're South Carolina, you needed to go in and sweep. You really needed to go in and sweep, and it just didn't happen in game 2. I mean, Eli Jones got really hit around. He didn't even last the third inning, 7 hits, 5 earned. I mean, he wasn't dominating guys. He wasn't striking guys out, really. So it was a couple of walks as well. Didn't have his best stuff, but the bullpen didn't really help him out. Matthew Becker kind of struggled behind him. But the bats couldn't really get it going against Carter Rustad for Missouri, and just like they did in game 1, and in game 3. But I also, Chris, game 1, Friday, or if it's Thursday, depending on whenever you start, you got to give the start to Ty Good. You got to. I've seen enough of Roman Kimbrel opening the game and going 40 pitches in 1 inning or 1 2/3. You got to give a start to Ty Good. He's been dominant. He's been so consistent this whole year. One of the best pitchers of Gamecock staff. I mean, 7 Ks in 4 innings, 1 hit. I mean, you got to get him a start. And Garrett Gainey behind him followed 5 Ks in just over 2 innings. He was great out of the bullpen. He had a really great weekend, I thought, because in game 3, he also pitched and almost went 4 innings, 1 hit, 5 Ks. I mean, his stuff, he was dialed in, he's locked in, sharp, and just kind of spinning it, and just had a really great control and idea of what he wanted to do and executed pitches. And so, yes, they won in Friday, but going forward, I mean, against Georgia, you gotta give Ty Good the ball at the gates, I think. Then they have Tennessee.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned, and I'll mention too, the Ole Miss Auburn series, obviously the most underwhelming of the weekend. I'll be curious to see what Ole Miss can do down the stretch. It'd be fun to see them in the postseason and get both Mississippi schools in there. When it comes to South Carolina, Mizzou, though, to your point, I mean, I think you look at this series and people will just see, hey, South Carolina took 2 of 3, whatever is what it is. That's not surprising. Should they have swept? Sure, but whatever, they won the series. But this series was wildly close. It looked like game 3, Mizzou is literally up 4-1. 4-1. And I think there was a moment where South Carolina robs a grand slam in that game that would have put that one, which you feel like at that point's out of reach. They robbed the homer. South Carolina comes back. They win the game. Also, game 1 was really close up until late. I think the Gamecocks are like a 7-run 7th inning. They win that one comfortably. But to your point, Harrison, because you got the sticks, right? We all know Ethan Petrie, Cole Messina, those guys have Blake Jackson, Kennedy Jones. They got to be hot. They got to be swinging it well. But if I'm a South Carolina fan, I'm terrified of what I'm seeing on the mound. I think South Carolina baseball has a real issue on the bump. They're getting away with it right now. Congratulations. You're beating the Kentuckys of the world. You're beating Mizzou. Good job. And maybe they can keep it going. But the recipe right now they have on the bump, it is not a recipe for an extended stay in the postseason because, the teams that rise to the top, their pitching steps up in the big moments. And Eli Jones is getting shelled. And he's supposed to be.
He's their Friday guy. He was.
And then, like to your point, it literally does not make sense. This methodology, and it really just, I'm just going to say it, Harrison. It goes to show how much of a dumbass Kingston is. It really does, because nobody with a brain would think this would work. And it's not about working against Mizzou or in the regular season. If you honestly think this is the best way to go about things going into the postseason, that says all you need to know. Really, truly. I get it on Sunday. Have a Johnny Holstaff day. But on Fridays, having this whole opener thing, and Roman Kimball's he's been whatever. Like you said, Ty Good has been electric behind him. Why he's not getting a chance to start. Eli Jones, obviously the move to him to Saturdays or game twos, that's completely wrecked him. So it's pitching that wins in the postseason. That would be my greatest concern right now from South Carolina. Yes, you're finding ways to get it done, but Harrison, it's like we talked about. This is going to be a team, Mark Kingston baseball, 35 to 36 wins. They're going to go 15-15, 16-14, kind of right at that 500 slot. And you look right now, where is South Carolina? They're 32-15. They're 13-11 in conference play with 2 weekends to go. Like they're just, it is so on brand. It's crazy. I'll be curious. Next 2 weekends, Georgia at Tennessee. To your point, I just don't know if you can survive those 2 weekends with what you're getting on the mound. They're putting a lot of pressure on their offense right now. A lot of pressure.
And the offense is doing great, I think. A lot of guys have really stepped up. You've had a Kennedy Jones who's really stepped up as well. And then you've had, Gavin Cassis, who had a really slow start to the year. He's really stepped up as well. But Cole Messina had a fantastic weekend. I mean, you got to give him some props. 5 RBIs in game 1. And then you have Ethan Petrie, who hits his 40th career home run in game 1, which talk about Charlie Condon setting the single season record and career record for home runs at Georgia. Petrie is 9th on the list now with 41 after his 1 in game 3. So that's kind of interesting. But
gonna be hard to ever catch Justin Smoke at South Carolina.
It's going to be very hard. It's very hard.
But in this era with the bats, because Justin Smoke was swinging the orange stealth and the white stealth, and if you're a baseball guy, you know how important that is because those bats were insane.
Not to detour though, but the Paul Tates had his bat sawed off in half at Georgia on Sunday. Like the bat literally broke in half. All of Georgia, I don't know if it's the same bat or like they have 4 or 5 of them, but they all swing the Cat 10. So I thought that was really interesting. And I've never seen a metal bat break in half like that before. He ended up with just a hand. It was like a wood bat broken in half. It was wild to see. But the offense really stepped it up. Ethan Petrie is the Hunter Hines equivalent for South Carolina, but Cole Messina is kind of him, and they're like Dakota Jordan and Hunter Hines. But to have guys like Gavin Cassis and kind of the bottom third of the lineup step up, and Kennedy Jones and those guys, Thomas LaCroix, and them, just it's great for them, and they really need it because of how inconsistent the pitching staff has been.
And we'll see what happens. Again, they've got a lot to figure out, a lot of loose ends. South Carolina, again, and I think that's what makes the SEC so great, Harrison, though, is that they're one of those middle-of-the-pack teams. If things click, if things come together, if they get hot, they can beat anybody. But those things have to click and come together. They also can go the other direction, and they could go 2 in barbecue. It is very much a possibility for them.
There's several mid-teams that are in the middle of the SEC that can do it either way.
Yeah. So South Carolina, if they can get some things short up, you just got to get the pitching figured out because, what they're getting, again, Eli Jones has not been himself. The whole opener thing with Roman Kimball, to your point, just feels very strange. Matthew Becker's not pitching all that well for them in game 2s as well. Heck, dude, their game 3 starter, Dylan Eskew, went 1 1/3, 4 earned runs. Garrett Gainey comes in, thank goodness for them, shuts it down, obviously. And
that was a huge spot to shut that down immediately. Coming in the game early and just having everything dialed in.
Be the stabilizer. And then
he's got that demeanor. We talk about how, he's a little excessive in celebration, but you got to have something like that that's kind of, I don't want to say a hothead, but just kind of just energy through the head, but can control it, and just has that that bulldog mindset. He really is like that. So I think it's great. It's a great role for him to kind of be a stopper.
And then McCreary and Chris Veach also in that game 3, they were fantastic. 4 innings pitched, 1 hit, no earned, 6 strikeouts. So anyways, you get the series win over Mizzou. You had to have it. Mizzou obviously licking their wounds, just fighting to try to get to Hoover. But South Carolina, one of those really, really interesting middle-of-the-pack teams. It's going to be interesting to see how they are able to piece things together down the stretch. Harrison, as we close out here and look at the top 25, Tennessee, the new number 1 team in the country, as we mentioned, Texas A&M at 3, Kentucky at 4, Arkansas falls to number 5. You look at the rest of the top 25, South Carolina at 13, Mississippi State at 14, Georgia at 15. That is it for the SEC. Your thoughts on the top 25?
Interesting to see. I think the top 5 is in a good spot. I mean, it's interesting because, Tennessee drops a game, but then jumps up 3 spots. I mean, yeah, I guess you drop A&M down. I thought Mississippi State might have gone up a little higher. Same with Georgia. But, I mean, you don't see Vanderbilt in the 25 anymore.
No, I mean,
So, I mean,
dude, how can you? How can you put them in there?
yeah, I mean, I
They're,
thought
they're
Georgia was
10
going
and
to
14 in conference play. I mean, it's
Yeah, no, for rightfully so. But I thought Georgia would have jumped up a little bit higher and over South Carolina. I thought that would have been about a 12, 13 maybe, and South Carolina would have been like 14, 15 maybe. I thought they would have just made that jump a little more, but
I will say
it'll decide itself real quick.
Yeah, I think Tennessee being number 1 too, man. I don't think it's just beating Florida 2 or 3. I think it's the fact
It's the full body of work.
It's the fact they've won 7 straight SEC series. So at some point, like all they're doing is winning.
Yeah,
Also,
Tennessee
too,
rightfully deserves to be number 1 in the country. It's
yeah,
just the consistency they've had at such a high level on the pitching side, on the hitting side, and defensively. There's no reason they shouldn't be. I mean, you could have made the case for them a couple weeks ago, but it's the proof's in the pudding. They do it week after week, and now they're number 1 in the country.
And our future SEC brethren, Oklahoma at number 18, and Texas just swept Oklahoma State, who is number 19 in the rankings. So Texas is starting to heat up. Oklahoma's having a great year. The SEC is going to be even more loaded than it already is.
Especially because everyone will make the tournament too.
Yes, everyone will make the tournament. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Harrison, before we get out of here, one last thing. Biggest takeaway from the weekend for you? What's the thing you're walking away from week number 8 of SEC play?
Georgia continuously proves they need to be taken more seriously week after week. And they in year 1 of Wes Johnson, I mean, it's unbelievable how good they've gotten throughout the season and exceed expectations. But they're going to be a force to be reckoned with in the SEC in the coming years. But they can make a real deep postseason run this season, that's for sure.
Harrison, I would go with Kentucky. It's one thing it's kind of like if you've ever seen Django Unchained, where he said, "You had my curiosity, now you have my attention." That's kind of how I feel about Kentucky. It's like, okay.
That's how I felt about Georgia.
I was, you piqued my curiosity. Now I'm really paying attention, because it's one thing to have the kind of season they were having. You take down Arkansas, though. I mean, all of a sudden, as we get closer to postseason, and again, this is going to sort itself out, like, you got to really start. I mean, Kentucky's fighting for a top 8 national seed. They're there. What am I talking about?
Number 2 in RPI. They have the most quad 1 wins in Division 1 at 19 or 17 quad 1 wins, I believe.
Yeah, a favorite. I would say a favorite at this point to go to Omaha. A lot of things have to work out. What are the matchups like in the postseason, both regional and supers? But I mean,
they were my preseason sleeper to go to Omaha.
Yeah, this team has got something special about them, no doubt. So, guys, that's going to do it all for us. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Again, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. Check out the podcast wherever you get podcasts. Find us across all social media platforms. And be sure to check out our website, SECUnfiltered.com. For Harrison Fant, I'm Chris Phillips. We appreciate you guys tuning in. And we'll catch you on the other side.